That adaptation and mitigation cannot be separated. Second, I'm going to explore just what infrastructure could be in relation to the question extreme weather and water quality. Should Sault Ste. Marie invest in infrastructure adapted for a changing climate? Third, I'd like to try to respond to the question, that is, should Sault Ste. Marie invest in this infrastructure? And finally, I'd like to consider what this implies and what it is that we can do to prepare for the impacts of climate change from an infrastructure standpoint. So the first point I want to make is that mitigation and adaptation cannot be separated. If we're going to adapt to climate changes, then we're going to have to mitigate our greenhouse gas emissions. Basically, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. While we can delay the realization for a long time that adaptation costs will only continue, while we can delay that for a long time, adaptation costs will only continue to rise until the effects of mitigation kick in. So the key points to remember here are twofold. The longer we wait to mitigate, the higher the costs of adaptation will become and the more severe the impacts will be. So adaptation must include action to ensure greater social equity, poverty reduction, and wealth and power redistributions. Calling for investment now, the report concludes that every dollar now spent on risk reduction will translate into $60 saved in the future. Just to note that Sioux Council did have a vote yesterday on infrastructure. A report went to Council. And so right now we're looking at spending millions of dollars on infrastructure that's probably not going to perform. The problem with doing that is that what we need to do is we need to look at urban planning more in order to resolve some of these issues.
When we talk about climate, we know that climate is a measure of the average pattern, variation in temperature, precipitation over very long periods of time. And there are four big questions that probably everyone has here when it comes to climate change and also models. Four big questions that came about. So, has there been detectable warming in recent years? So since 1850, global mean temperatures have increased by approximately 1.5 degrees. So also we know that from pretty much 10,000 years ago, since the end of the last glacial period until now, climate has been more or less stable, and that has led to our civilization pretty much. We're now 9 billion people on the planet, and so that was built on a stable climate. But in the Quaternary period, leading to 10,000 years ago, there were 6 glaciation periods, and the climate tended to, for the most part, to be cooler. So what does that tell biologists? That the species, the biodiversity, selective pressures were pretty much more on the cool side than what we have today. So that's how, so that tells us that. It also tells us some of that information that there have been rapid periods, relatively rapid periods of climate change. So the third question, are humans to blame for this warming? And there is very high confidence, according to the IPCC, that the global average net effect of human activities since 1750 has been one of warming, with a radiative forcing of 1.6 watts per meter square. So basically, since the Industrial Revolution, the concentrations of carbon dioxide, they have increased by 30%, methane by 145%, and nitrous oxide by 15%. So we can't expect to increase these greenhouse gases and that nothing is going to happen. When we look at the paleo record, we know that CO2 has always tracked temperature and vice versa. So how much warming are we looking at if emissions continue to increase? Well, climate sensitivity is likely to be in the range of 2 to 4.5 degrees, with the best estimate at 3 degrees in the next 100 years.
Keeping in mind that any new infrastructure is only as good, thank you, as the connecting and receiving infrastructure. So in Sault Ste. Marie, our receiving infrastructure that is downstream of some of our flood control channels is old. It was built when the city was built. Some of these channels and aqueducts are over 100 years old. When maintenance continues on that, some of it's been upgraded, maintained, and repaired, but it continues to age. The biggest issue with replacement of existing infrastructure is, of course, the cost. We're no longer living in the time of government spending on infrastructure. There are more programs vying for the same tax dollar. public health and safety must always be at the forefront in the minds of the decision makers of Sault Ste. Marie. So, to me, to answer some of those questions, the first step in the infrastructure investment is a replacement of some of the older infrastructure. We can build flood control channels to meet a regional storm. Are the pipes accepting our flood waters good enough? Do they have the capacity to meet the demands of 1 in a 100-year flood? I have to say the city has been proactive. Planning is already underway through different strategies and regulations, especially with the new stormwater management plan that the city's enacted to meet the current standards that we have. Not future standards, but the ones we need to meet currently. But the fact that we actually have that management in place is heartening to me.
The public health agencies around the world are preparing. We're like Girl Guides or Boy Scouts. We want to be prepared because we see what's coming. We see that there's going to be increases in diseases, new infectious diseases. There's going to be new bugs coming up here. That's exciting, but they're going to bring their own vector-borne diseases. We have to be prepared for that. There's going to be increased risks to our food supplies and our drinking water supplies. So we have to be prepared to find ways to protect the public and protect those resources for our communities. And these things are on our list of things to do, and we're trying to get everything in position so that we can adapt. And we would like mitigation to happen too, because that just makes it all the easier for the job in the long term. Now, I really like the way George Carlin kind of put the global warming thing, that the planet will be fine, but will people survive? I think that's our biggest public health concern, is will people survive?